I told you that the Buccaneers had a bottom third offense, would you believe that Tom Brady had retired or had not retired?
Well, I would have assumed Tom Brady would have definitely retired.
You would assume Blaine Gabbert was starting for this team, right? That would have been the common assumption. If I blind taste test, I told you the Buccaneers had a bottom third offense, it would probably be with Tom Brady, the greatest of all time quarterback, not starting for this team. However, that is not the case. And while there's tons of breaking news going on with Tom Brady, we're going to focus on it strictly from the fantasy football element. We're going to talk about those playmakers or lack thereof of playmakers right now that this Buccaneers offense has and whether or not you should be worried about it as a fantasy owner. So let's start with the big guy up front, Tom Brady. Tom Brady, what is he this year in fantasy?
Tom Brady is a QB2 right now at mid-range. He's not somebody you would want to be starting unless it's in a super flex league. I started him last night in the league. I had him in over Trevor Lawrence against Denver. Don't feel good about it. It was an okay game. He got a touchdown and some yards with no turnovers, but it's hard to feel good about Tom Brady right now.
I agree with your assertion on Tom Brady at this current point in time. He's obviously regressed to the point where I'm sure there's better options for you to pursue in fantasy. If you have the opportunity to still sell on name, if people still buy low on Tom Brady, I would consider it because at this point, I don't feel confident putting him in my starting lineup. There's plenty of other better options. There's even guys that I feel you could stream off waivers that might produce better results for you, especially on matchup plays. And I'd like to even say with confidence that he's a matchup-based starter, but we saw him struggle in a week against Carolina. So I don't know what really are the matchups that I'm targeting Tom Brady for. Atlanta even gave him problems. And I could trace a lot of the issues back to that offensive line. It's hard to replace value on the offensive line. I don't care what the Buccaneers do at the trade deadline. They're not going to find a competent starting offensive lineman that's going to just cue right in and be fine. I don't think Tom Brady still has the sway to get Rob Gronkowski out of retirement because they don't even have
No,
a reliable tight end option. And now we move to the pass catchers. Let's start talking on these guys. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. Is there one that you trust more than the other at this point?
I still like both of them. It's just that they're not scoring much, which is weird, especially for Mike Evans. I mean, they're still getting decent yardage and a decent number of catches, so they're not bad fantasy football plays right now. But they're not scoring much, and nobody else is. Even Fournette is tough right now, although he has been scoring a little bit.
Is it safe to say that Godwin and Evans are both wide receiver twos at best?
I think wide receiver two is about right. I mean, you're not going to put him on the bench yet, but you're not expecting the world out of those two guys either.
The fact that you can look in your starting lineup and say, if there's a player with a better matchup, I would feel comfortable starting someone over Mike Evans or Godwin, I think is a point we didn't really think we'd reach in the year. Now, I would say about Godwin, given like you mentioned the targets and the receptions, I would still say he's a high floor wide receiver too. Baseline minimum, he's gaining you 13, 12, 15 points a week. You really want your wide receiver one taking more of the reins and driving your offense. And if your wide receiver two is more of a high floor option, that's not a terrible spot to be.
Right.
Especially if you got away with drafting Godwin late and he's more of your flex, because I think a lot of people that do have Godwin, it's not like you drafted him with a really high ADP. He was going in the fifth, sixth round. So I still think Godwin is good for the value. I think with Mike Evans, he's more worrisome because you did invest the second round pick into grabbing him. The fact that he hasn't really produced to the standards, I'm sure is killing a lot of fantasy owners. Like I said, there's not really a tight end I want. There's not really a third wide receiver I want. If you're still holding on to
Nope.
guys like Julio Jones, what are you doing? Just get rid of them. That you have no spot on your roster. The backup running backs, meh. There's a lot of meh going on. Mostly because, again, this offensive line is so bad. This is a really bad offensive line, and it's clear that that's been one of the big reasons that Tom Brady, Mike Evans, Godwin, Fournette, they've all suffered this year. And I don't really see the turning point in the schedule that's going to allow them to be much better than this. Any other closing thoughts on this Buccaneers offense before we move on?
Maybe the Week 10 Seattle game could be a turnaround point.
But I
I
kind
don't
of like
know.
Seattle a little bit as a scrappy kind of defense.
Yeah, but I mean, they've been involved in a lot of shootouts.
True.
Maybe it's a chance, but it's tough. And Mike Evans is hard because you did put a lot of capital into him, and you could try to trade him, but you're not going to get that back. And Julio Jones and Russell Gage, if you haven't cut them already, it's time. We were hoping they could have some value if Tom Brady was looking like he did last year, where he was number 2 in MVP voting. He's not even close to that right now.
So we're starting to get to that point where we're talking playoff matchups. So setting yourself up for the fantasy football playoffs. How do you feel about the Buccaneers end of the year schedule? So in week 15, they have Cincinnati, week 16 at Arizona, and week 17, the rematch against Carolina.
We know Carolina's already got their game plan figured out for them.
Is
Not
this
the
a buy
worst
low
schedule.
opportunity? If you're trying to set yourself up for a fantasy playoff run, would you try and target any of these guys knowing that their value couldn't be any lower?
No, I just
Gotten
don't
that
see the
bad, huh?
turnaround at this point.
Okay,
I don't think it's going to get much better.
if it's gotten that bad that we're talking, you don't even see them as buy low, then that's really problematic for the Buccaneers. I'm sure that actual Buccaneers fans are feeling it harder than anyone else. As did you know that the Atlanta Falcons and Carolina Panthers game will determine who is first place in the NFC South? How wild is that? But anyway, guys, if you have any fantasy football questions, any at all, drop them below in the comment section. We'd like to hear your thoughts, any start bench opportunities, any waiver claims, trades that you're working on before your deadlines. Leave a like on the video, helps the channel. Subscribe to the channel, helps us a lot more. Follow us on social media. From Andrew Hohman and Ju-Ju. Stay safe, happy, and healthy. We will see you next time.